But tomorrow is Election Day. In mostly low-profile races across the country, Americans have been turning out to vote early already or planning on voting tomorrow. In states where Republicans are in control, voting has mostly gotten harder over the past few years. In the Texas election tomorrow, in Dallas County alone, 1 out of every 4 voters has had to file a legal affidavit in order to try to get their vote counted because of the laws. 1 in 4. In Texas, even the state government admits that something like 700,000 people in the state are legal voters, but do not have the ID that you need to be able to show to be able to vote in that state now. Of those 700,000 people, we learned today the total number who have been issued free IDs by the state of Texas so they can get their vote cast and counted. Out of 700,000 people who need these IDs to be able to vote, do you know how many people have got their IDs from the state? Out of 700,000? As of today, the number is 121. Not 121,000, 121. That is the latest figure we've got. We asked tonight, and that's what they told us. 121 out of 700,000 people. 121 legal voters who will be able to vote. 699,877, maybe not. Happy Election Eve. Good luck voting. You might need it. Joining us now is Congressman Marc Veasey of Texas. Congressman Veasey is one of 7 plaintiffs in a federal lawsuit contesting Texas's voter ID law. He was a member of the Texas legislature when it originally passed that bill in 2011. Congressman Veasey, thanks very much for being with us tonight.
Thank you, Rachel.
So tomorrow is going to be the first statewide test of the ID law in Texas on Election Day. We have already seen some of its implications in terms of early voting. 1 in 4 voters in Dallas is having to file an affidavit in order to try to get their vote counted. How are you feeling about Election Day in your home state?
Well, Rachel, let me tell you, Greg Abbott has made a mess out of Texas voting. There was nothing wrong with our voting system in Texas previous to this voting ID law that was passed in the legislature. Texas had great voting laws. We have a very nice early vote period. You can vote for almost 2 weeks during early vote. Senior citizens have the right to vote by mail. We made it easy to vote by Texas, but because of the numbers that you talked about earlier, Republicans are seeing the growing numbers of Latinos in the state, the growing numbers of African Americans, and they are beginning to be concerned because they haven't made any sort of outreach into the black community or the Latino community, and so they're trying to skewer the elections their way. I think that this is a tragedy, and Rachel, I'll tell you that it's so bad that I'm sure that you saw earlier that that Wendy Davis actually had to file an affidavit to vote. Greg Abbott, her presumptive opponent in the general election in 2014, he actually had to file an affidavit to vote. But the former Speaker of the House, Jim Wright from Fort Worth, he went to go and try and obtain a voter ID card, and he couldn't obtain a voter ID card. That's how absurd this law is. That's how bad it's gotten here. And it's all about suppressing the rights of African Americans and Latinos, elderly, and the poor to vote in the state of Texas.
I was struck by the AP observation, what they found in their assessment, and they went through county by county and looked at the voter list in every county in Texas to see what the impact of this ID law would be. And they found that the Texas voters who don't have the right kind of ID to be able to vote live disproportionately in counties that have high poverty rates and or a large percentage of minorities. Was it known that that would be the consequence of this law when you were originally debating it and fighting it in the legislature when you were there?
Absolutely. When I was in the state legislature, I made these points. Other Democrats made these points over and over again. We had data that showed that the people that would be disproportionately impacted by this voter ID law were Latino voters and African American voters. The Republicans never questions that we raised. They were just so eager to pass this particular law that would disenfranchise voters. And I think that what is really sad, Rachel, is that women are being disproportionately impacted by this law in larger numbers than was previously thought. It's absolutely terrible. And for a state like Texas that is growing so fast, that has such a good reputation as a place to live and do business. It's sad that now, because of this law that was passed by Republicans, we are known as a state that is trying to make it harder for people to vote just so it can favor the Republican Party. I think it's terrible.
Congressman, when I look at the numbers about Latinos in Texas and their political preferences, which are very, very strongly Democratic, the last few elections voting Democratic by 20, 25-point margins or more. But then I look at those turnout numbers in a state that the census says is 40% Latino, to only be turning out 17% Latino on Election Day. That is obviously something that very much scares Republicans in terms of what would happen if Latinos did start turning out in greater numbers. But it also represents a real failure for the Democratic Party for not having been able to maximize their vote among that population that's been so friendly to Democratic candidates. What do you make of that, and do you think Democrats are getting any better?
Well, you know, Democrats, we're working harder and harder every day on outreach, and we are making gains in this state. And I will tell you that when you look at this voter ID law, I've worked on campaigns before. I was an elected official. I worked on campaigns, and I saw many Latino citizens that would come into the mall where we ran voter turnout programs in Southeast Fort Worth, and we would ask, would you like to go and vote? And oftentimes, many of those voters would say, yes, I want to vote, but I rode the bus here, or I don't have my own car, and so I can't vote. And we would say, no, you can vote in Texas because we have good laws here in Texas. If you have a copy of a bill, or if you have an ID card from your university or your high school, you can vote as long as you're 18 years of age. And now I know that same population that I talked with at that mall in Southeast Fort Worth that really wanted to vote, that they're going to hear this law and they're going to be discouraged. They're not going to go back like Speaker Wright did or like Wendy Davis did. They're going to say that they're going to think that the state of Texas doesn't want them to vote, and they're going to sit out. And the Republicans do exactly what they were doing when they sought to disenfranchise these very voters that you're talking about right now.
Congressman Marc Veasey, Democrat of Texas, thanks for helping us understand this tonight, sir. It's nice to have you here.
Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. All right.